Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 303 of Humanity Rising. This also happens to be our final session in this last day of July before we take a break for the next couple of weeks during August, where staff and people generally are taking a holiday, traveling, and we'll be back around the 1st of September. We'll be sending everyone communications, of course, about our plans. And I want to thank everyone for the extraordinary support that we have experienced and garnered as Humanity Rising has grown and broadcasting on a daily basis to tens of thousands of people, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. It's been very gratifying and heartwarming to feel humanity rising at this extraordinary moment in history. One of the things that we have been discussing over the last 6 weeks, as many of you know, is the report from scientists initially in Arctic News saying that we have now reached 2 degrees centigrade in temperature rise globally over pre-industrial levels. We've also passed 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And that means that we're in a tipping point. We are no longer at the edge of the precipice. We're now going over the precipice. And the scientists in Arctic News are now predicting what they're calling an extinction event by 2026, as global temperatures are now projected to spin out of control. And there's speculation and projections by scientists that will hit 3 degrees centigrade within the next 5-6 years. And if that happens, it's basically game over. The report garnered a lot of controversy. Mainstream scientists said it was too severe. But in the last couple of days, thousands of climate scientists have signed letters and petitions saying that it's not only true, but of the 31 critical indicators of the planetary ecology, 18 of the 31 are at a tipping point, not just global temperatures, not just parts per million. So we stand, my friends, at an inflection point. And we need to start taking in not only the gravity of what is occurring, but the urgent necessity to begin planning for an eruption out of the global ecology and out of extreme weather events that is going to shake the foundations of our world in ways that not only we don't imagine, but in ways we can't imagine. And there's only one way to prepare, and that is to engage collectively in the opportunity that the crisis represents. That's what we did with Humanity Rising. We were in the depths of the pandemic. And rather than just cowering in the face of the pandemic, we tracked the opportunity vector in the pandemic. And out of that came Humanity Rising. And now we're being told that there's something more severe, much more severe than the pandemic that's now coming. And so what's naturally emerging out of Humanity Rising is a global coalition of hundreds of groups from around the world. We're already at 400 organizations that are part of Humanity Rising. And now we're partnering with networks of organizations, and they're coming together around the single purpose of regeneration. So that over the next several years, through what is naturally forming, which we're calling a global regeneration corps, in the spirit of John Kennedy's Peace Corps in the 1960s, but in this case, empowering young people and millennials of all kinds around the world to create pods, groups of regeneration first responders, so that we can use the energy of the chaos that's accumulating in the global system as an opportunity to build coherence of regeneration. Humanity Rising is shape-shifting to meet this challenge. Ubiquity University is shape-shifting to meet this challenge. So as we further develop Humanity Rising and our university and our partnerships, regeneration of the human spirit, regeneration of our activities in the world around becoming first responders, so that we're ready, so that when the hit comes, and it's coming, we can absorb the energy of chaos and trim tab it regeneratively into greater coherence. If we can all do that together, we will be ready. And in fact, we will not only survive, we will figure out in ways we can't imagine how to thrive. But we all need to take in that we aren't in Kansas anymore. We aren't at the precipice. We're falling over the precipice. And that means that we need to engage in the same shift of state internally that the climate system is experiencing externally. Because only a shift of state will suffice to give us the energy and the capacity to do what now needs to be done. And that actually is the topic that we want to explore today. How do we, at this moment, create within ourselves the future human? Before we dive into that domain, let us just pause for a moment, as we always do on Humanity Rising as we commence our programs, and just take a minute or two and just center yourself in your body. Take a breath, close your eyes, and place your attention on your heart. Just for the next minute or two, listen to your heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and deep thanksgiving that you're alive. We're all alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey, when nothing less than the reimagination of the human is at stake. Thank you, everyone. And now, with a heart full of gratitude and a heart full of appreciation and love for each and every one of you who are joining our session today, I want to introduce two powerful women who have been leaders in our culture, who have come together to write a trilogy on the human future, which is just being published and is now a bestseller in various bookstores and on Amazon around the world. Jean Houston, who you all know, who's been on various programs for Humanity Rising over the last year and a half, one of the founders of the human potential movement that has so profoundly shaped human culture over the last 50 years. One of the founders of the social artistry movement in terms of how we shape our souls and cultures with the high mastery of artistry. She's written 30 or 40 books and an equal number of unpublished manuscripts, and has really been a beacon to many of us over the last several decades, as we all have taken on the great and noble task of the transformation of human consciousness and human identity at this time. She's joined by Anneloes Smitsman, who, like Jean, is a psychonaut and voyager of the human spirit. She's the founder and CEO of Earthwise Center. She helped draft the Seeds Constitution. She consults with organizations and has been in a leadership in Europe and elsewhere in the reimagination of the human. And it is out of that Jean and Anneloes found each other. And I'm sure it was an explosive coming together of two powerful souls and minds. So as we bring Humanity Rising to a close, we thought this would be the perfect session to both inspire us and galvanize us into deeper understandings of human possibility. So Jean, Anneloes, I turn the program over to you, and when you finished your presentation, we'll circle back. As Jean and Anneloes are speaking, everyone, if you have questions or comments, put them in the chat. Although when we get into the question and answer, we'll try to enable people to actually speak and be visible so we can make the conversation more robust. Thank you all. Jean, Anneloes, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, old friend. Dear Jim, you always hit the right spot. I've known you for umpteen years, and you're always there in the cutting edge of what needs to be cut. And what you said today is the most succinct and powerful unfolding of who and what we are, where we are, and what we yet may need to do. I am so proud to call you my friend. Well, how did it all start for us? For many years, as Jim said, I've studied human potentials all over the world. I've worked in over 100 countries and have really tried to mind the soul of who and what we really are and where we're going and how we're going to get there. Early, I realized that we were headed for complete, total catastrophe. And I had been studying and being a professor of, a whole bunch of things like human development, but also about the spiritual unfolding. What does the spiritual life have to say to us in this time of so much breakdown? What are the breakthroughs? And the things that would really speak to me that then I would put forward were things like what Meister Eckhart said, that the eye by which I see God is the same eye by which God sees me. I said, that's it. That's where it is. How do we comprehend this, not just in terms of spiritual exercise, but joining with God eye, the whole cosmos? And I began to realize that we are not just biodegradable, biodegradable space-time suits holding minds that are in a state of yearning. We are something else. We are not just the latest product of the metabolism of the galaxy. We hold the future in ourselves. Then I got very much involved with the study of time and current quantum scientists' notion that time is not one thing. Time, past, present, future are in fact simultaneous. Well, if they're simultaneous, yes, we can go back and we can shift things in our past, not major traumas, but small things, so that we, in a sense, we're editing the texts of God, if you will. But what about the relationship to the future? What about somewhere in this vastness of the universe, of the cosmos, they have gone through something like this? How did they come through if they survived? How do we find our future brilliance? And I was just wondering about that and wondering, surely there is someone out there who I can partner with in this exploration. Well, my great big golden doodle dog, Habibi, which means in Arabic sweetie pie, began to paw at a corner of the room. And she wouldn't stop pawing and pawing and pawing. And I, oh, come on, what is it? Is there a mouse there? And it was a rug, and there was like a paper that was clearly on the other side of the rug. And I pulled back the paper, pulled back the rug, and it was a brilliant paper on how the future patterns the present. I said, whoa, that's right up what I'm thinking. And it was written by a woman living on the island of Mauritius, Anne-Marie Smitsman, and Anneloes Smitsman. So I got in touch with her, and it turns out she'd been trying to get in touch with me, but I get so much email, I really didn't see her letters. Well, we got together, and every day for the last, 16, 17 months, we worked together on various forms, Zoom, etc., Facebook, and we wrote this trilogy. It was a huge trilogy. It was like 800 pages, which means it wasn't a book, it was a doorstop. And we realized we better create it as a trilogy. And it is a trilogy that addresses many of the yearning points that Jim so beautifully stated. How do we regrow ourselves, our minds, by getting in touch with what we already are? We are cosmic beings. We are cosmic agents. We are fractals of the universe. We hold an immense latency within ourselves, just like when we think of before we get born, when we're these little fertilized eggs, we are dots. That's all we are, little eggs, boom, that is coded for our becoming full human beings. Well, as cosmic potencies, we are coded. We are coded for these times. Be not afraid. You were made for these times. We are in the brink or at the crest of the beginning places of rinashita, renewal, a renaissance. And renaissances tend to occur when they are preceded by times of utter breakdown and pandemics. I've looked at 5 or 6 of them around the world, and this seems to be a truism. So we are now, I think, at the cusp of entering the Renaissance. How do we do it? Perhaps we need the engagement of our cosmic selves. And with that, we began to write and write. And I turn now you over to my dear friend, Anneloes. So Anneloes, please share with us a little more of how the story of the Future Humans Trilogy emerged and why this is really a Renaissance story, a new story for our time.
Thank you so much, Jean. And Jim, thank you so much for the profound messages that you shared, which rang very, very deep in my body. It's actually, when you really let it sink in, the implications of what you just shared with us, it is huge, it is profound. We're tipping over. And that brings us also then to how Jean and I have been working with that tipping point and what happens in the future. So when we were exploring these deeper questions, how do we co-create a world that works for everyone and is thrivable by design? Who do we need to become as the humans of such a world? What is this higher order of reality that we have not seemed to been able to constitutionalize in the very foundations of our societies, in the way that we grow and develop and evolve? So as we brought all of those insights and questions together, we felt the best way to go through our own discovery of that is to write this journey as a quest, which became the quest of Rose. Rose is the name of the main character in our book, because the rose is also always in a stage of unfolding. And she has such beauty, the rose, but she also has her thorns. And when we're looking also at the kind of cosmic spiral unfolding of life, we see the same pattern of the rose. So we felt that the archetype of the rose is also a deep archetype within us. So the rising of the future humans, what became very important in our exploration is, what then is future really? And what's the presence of the future in us? And what is the presence of the future in moments of deep crisis, in moments of breakdown, in moments of collapse, and in moments of tipping point? So the way we've been working with the tipping point is a birth point. When the baby needs to be readied in order to engage into the cervix, there's a tipping point. There is a moment in time where we need to go head down in order to engage and go through the birth canal. Right now, as a humanity, we need to go head down because we've been seeing everything upside down, inside out, in the wrong way around. So it's time for us also to bend our head in some deeper sense of humility and surrender, to go into the tipping point of a birth point. And when we started working with the future, what we noticed also, both from a new paradigm scientific understanding, as well as from a deeper mythological understanding, is that a future is that within us and within a system that allows life to restructure, that allows life to reset to a higher order of reality, a space of possibility and potentiality, and that we do so imaginally. So Jim, as you were sharing that now this incredible coherence that is building through Humanity Rising, as I was listening, I thought that's incredible. It's like the imaginal discs of the butterfly that started to activate last year. It sounds to me that they are linking up, forming imaginal cells, forming the imaginal organs to then grow the butterfly body and the butterfly consciousness. So this is really also at the depth of our story of the Future Humans Trilogy, is how then do we, all of us, within ourselves and together, now through an imaginal state of consciousness, access the future potentialities of a new era, of a new time, based on a very deep and profound trust that life is going to continue, and that life in the moment of pain and in the moment of crisis seems to be sending more of an influx of this imaginal potency and consciousness, so that we can reimagine, recreate, redesign, and transform ourselves and our world. So Jean and I were going to be reading now a little section from chapter 3 of The Quest of Rose, which is the first book of our Future Humans Trilogy. And Rose in our story is a woman in her mid-20s. She's part of many, many different cultures and backgrounds. Wanted to first become a biologist because she loves life and nature, and then felt, no, there is more. She's in love with stories, but she also is in love for anything that's hidden. Any hidden knowledge, any hidden wisdom. She's always looking for what's next and what's not said. And she really represents the future human. She goes through a major crisis. She almost dies at the beginning of the story because of COVID. And as she then goes through her own near-death experience, she starts to see how to access the cosmic architecture of our universe and the future potentials of a new time, including her own future potentials of a whole new era. And with that, she heals herself and starts to discover the keys for also how to transform our world. She's guided by her incredible grandmother, Verdandi, Icelandic grandmother, also part Sami, deep indigenous roots, also deep indigenous Nordic wisdom. And Verdandi is really like a female Merlin and guiding Rose then through that whole journey, through being able to understand or at least embrace all the deep changes that are happening within her. So Jean is going to be playing Verdandi. I will be playing Rose. Jean, are you ready?
I am ready. It begins with a consideration of myth. I know myth and mythic structures have been very important to many of you who participate in Ubiquity. So it begins with Verdandi saying to Rose, Rose, my darling, myth is the coded DNA of the human psyche. It's the stuff of the evolving self that awakens consciousness and culture according to the needs of time and place. It is the promise of our future becoming. Through the mythic initiations, you begin to discover that you are a valuable character in the drama of the world's soul, pushing the boundaries of your own local story and gaining the courage to be and to do so much more. What has been part of the collective as our shared myths or archetypes is now finding new rivers of unique stories emerging from the passion play of our individual lives. We are mentored, we are informed by the ancient myths, but we're also in an open moment, a jump time, where myth is recreating itself from the stuff of our personal experience.
So does that mean that most of the old systems are unable to guide us perhaps into the future or even prepare us for who we are to become, Grandma? And is that why so many people feel restless and angry and deceived and trapped and divided, even controlled and sometimes used or manipulated?
I think that's probably so.
Oh, well, I find it rather painful to realize that we're actually sometimes trapped in a world, that was never designed to flourish. It was just designed to take and extract and control.
Oh, my girl. It's time you become aware of the classic mythic pattern of the sacred wound that awakens our psyche to the necessity for change, like the crucifixion of Christ, irrespective of whether it really happened that way. The mythic pattern of the symbolic crucifixion on the cross of life is much, much older than the story of Christ. It's about the rebirth that happens at the center of the cross. The cross within the circle of life has been a symbol for indigenous people for thousands and thousands of years. The center of the cross is the place where new life enters as our old life dies. This is the place where the horizontal axis of our mundane life and the vertical axis of our spiritual life marry to bring forth a human who is a living bridge between heaven and earth.
Oh, but Grandma, can't we become mythic in less painful ways? To be nailed to a cross, and I don't want Jesus Christ or anyone else to have to make such painful sacrifices. Why do we need to get wounded to evolve to a higher consciousness? What if this pattern of wounding and self-sacrifice just belongs to the old mythic structures? Maybe there are whole new options for us to evolve that we've never explored. I want to grow in new mythic ways.
Oh, Rose, I understand that from your future perspective, this old mythic pattern may not resonate, but first be aware of the role it served before you bring in the new future patterns too quickly. After all, you also have thorns as the beautiful rose you are.
Well, all right then. Tell me more about this activating role of pain, if I really have to know it.
Oh, my dear, all of the classic myths have the theme of wounding at their core. Christ must have his crucifixion, otherwise there's no resurrection. Artemis must kill Actaeon when he comes too close. Job must have his boils. Dionysius must be childish and attract titanic enemies to rip him apart. An abundance of sacred wounding marks the core of all great Western myths and their intending gods and humans. Adam's rib, Achilles' heel, Odin's eyes, Orpheus's decapitation, Inanna's descent and torture, Prometheus's liver, Zeus's split head, Pentheus' dismemberment, Jacob's broken hip, Isaiah's seared lips, Persephone's married to darkness, to Hades, Eris's burnt shoulder, or Oedipus's blinding. So it goes on and on and on, wounding after wounding.
But why? Why are we so drawn to these stories, Grandma? We don't even seem to flinch or question all these terrors and wars. Why do we repeat it through our own lives? Just listening to this whole list of wounding, oh, it makes me feel uneasy. Just even makes my stomach hurt.
My dear, it might have something to do with the ways the stories carry us into the mystery, Rosie. The mystery, the marvel, the uncanny, the announcement that with wounding, the sacred enters into time. Each prefigures a journey, a renaissance, a turning point in the lives of gods and mortals. From the point of the wounding, the journeying of gods and humans proceeds towards new birth, and with it, the unfolding of a sensuous acuity to the needs of others that wasn't possible before. Now being more vulnerable, we then reach out and extend our hands and hearts to others who are wounded. It's only at such a pass that we grow into a larger sense of what life is really about, and act therefore out of I believe, a deeper and a nobler nature. For thousands of years, wounding served to open the doors of our sensibility to a larger reality, which is blocked to our habituated and conditioned point of view. Pathos gives us eyes and ears to see and hear and feel what our normal eyes and ears and feelings cannot.
Well, I just wish there was another way, Grandma, something less painful, a way to directly access the states of consciousness that make it possible for us to see the larger reality without having to suffer first. I'm sure this way exists somewhere in the universe, and maybe already within me.
Well, this is part of your quest, my girl. Ask the universe to join you in this quest, and you can be partners in creation, stewards of our future well-being. As our ancestors knew, this story is bigger than all of us. So bring in the future pattern of initiation. Use your imaginal powers to envision with all your sensory abilities this new future pattern for how humanity can become engaged in and committed to its self-transformation without the need for all this wounding first. No, don't answer the question now. Commit to the journey that will ready you to first receive and then become the answer.
All right. But I do think it's kind of ironic, these old mythic patterns of what they say is required to enter into cosmic unity or even effect change. Why make it so difficult and painful to connect with the deeper unity of life? Especially when we realize that cosmic information is already eternally present in all matters of life. Can't humans just relate to the information of immortality the way nature does? Something just doesn't add up, Grandma. all this self-harming, I still think that belongs to an archaic worldview of dualism and separation. It just doesn't make any sense to me that we need to sacrifice something from the whole in order to evolve or even receive something from the greater whole. I just can't accept that. Especially because I know and have experienced so deeply how our universe is whole and indivisible, and so am I. So there must be other options. I just know it.
Well, that's so right, my girl. So let's explore this. You see, that is what it means to become the future human of a whole new possibility, to become a future catalyst. Let me give you, and everybody who's on this call, an exercise to begin to do this. Begin by accepting that there are realms of existence and modes of being that extend beyond your personal mind. You already have imaginal power. Imaginal is the next level. It is the evolution of the imaginative. The imagination may activate the imaginal, which is that which holds the genius, the brilliance, the potencies, the alternatives, the new ways of being held in the universe. Imaginal power. Because we all do this, as does life in all its expression. Your imaginal power is your direct cosmic connection, which naturally connects you to the larger realities from where you draw inspiration, guidance, vision, and an intuitive sense of direction, as well as your ultimate growth, your ultimate transformation. The imaginal realm extends beyond what is more commonly known as the imaginative realm, as I just say, which is, as I say too often, just associated with imagination, fantasy. The imaginal realm includes the cosmic dimensions that are not merely mental. It also includes the transformative powers of the universe in the ways we think, perceive, and respond. Becoming more conscious now, more conscious of your imaginal powers and how you share this power with life and the universe. Once aware of your imaginal capacities, you can begin to utilize these capacities more consciously to effect the appropriate change in your life and the world around you. You're ready now. And you're ready now to begin the practice. Close your eyes, please. And take a few deep breaths. Relax yourself completely and let go. Let go. And then let go some more. Become aware of life inside you, in your breath, in your thoughts, in your feelings, in your intentions, and even your questions. Acknowledge how this same power of life is also within nature, in plants, animals, oceans, the whole planet, the whole universe. Your life force and nature's life force are the same and are deeply connected. The power of renewal, healing, transformation, rebirth, which are intrinsic to life, are also within you. Each of these powers are also imaginal powers, intrinsic to life within you, granting you the capacities to self-create and self-renew. Powers to heal, learn, develop, and evolve. Hold the intention now to connect directly with your potent imaginal powers. Feel your imaginal powers awakening and activating inside of you. You may even experience this as a wonderful sensation that spreads through your body as your imaginal powers awaken within you. You are performing an imaginal process. Welcome to a new way of being and exploring. Your imaginal power is your direct access to the creative powers of the cosmos. You may call upon this power, enormous as it is, whenever required. This power yearns to join you and brings profoundly new ways of being and doing to your life. Let your ability to access and direct your imaginal power grow even more. Feel your imaginal powers grow and glow within you. As they grow stronger, they are naturally optimizing and enhancing your creative abilities, as well as your capacity to envision and intuit. Sense your healing power and your transformative power. You only need to think of your imaginal power. It naturally activates. Your imaginal powers are drawing you forward to the higher realization of the path of your destiny, the path of your
We lost Jean. Anneloes, she'll be back in a second, I'm sure, but if you could pick it up.
Yes, of course. So just ask all of you now to slowly come out of this beautiful exercise. Jean, are you back with us? Coming out of the imaginal state, being fully present here and now. Allowing yourself to integrate beautifully what's just shifted within you by listening to Jean. And when you are ready to naturally just open your eyes, feel your whole body, move your shoulders, your feet, your hand, being fully present here and now. Jean, back to you. Can you hear us, Jean? You are muted. You just need to unmute.
And dear friends, we do have an upcoming Catalyst course hosted by Dream Tending, where we explore all of this in greater depth, including the cosmic compass designed by Anneloes. Anneloes, is there anything you want to add before going back to June?
Yes, just the pause again of what an incredibly profound time this is, and that it also requires conscious communities like the one we are in now, and support to develop capacities that we don't even know yet how to name those. And this is where the coherence that Jim spoke of earlier is so incredibly important. Because what we're seeing in systems change, that whether a system tips towards breakdown or transformation is a direct result of the evolutionary coherence of that system. The inner coherence of ourselves, our systems of our world, is like an invisible conductor in a symphony that allows the system to stay in tune with its deeper wholeness and its new opportunities of becoming. And this is also what Jean was just sharing in the Catalyst course. We'll be providing this beautiful, coherent, cocooning space to support us to together explore and develop these capacities. There's one more thing I want to present, coming back to these tipping points of runaway climate change that Jim mentioned earlier. There's a section in our book, in The Quest of Rose, the first book, where Rose is, you may recall it, Jean, where she's asking, you know what? Initiations always seem to go together with fire. So during times of rites of passage and major initiations, the element of fire is incredibly important. So she's asking for Dundee, but with all this accelerated warming and all this heat that's trapped in our ocean as a result of that as well, which is one of the tipping points that is starting now to cause the acceleration as well as it's releasing. She's saying, what if instead of that fire becoming destructive to us and we becoming destructive to us, what if humanity's biggest learning is actually about fire? And what if we haven't embodied the true nature of fire within us? So we're manifesting it outside of us in a destructive way. And could it be that there is a phenomenal amount of energy and also in the element of fire available right now to help us catalyze into our next stage of evolutionary growth and becoming? And maybe that's a nice point to explore further with Jim as well. It'd be lovely to bring it back to him.
Jim, over to you.
Thank you so much. This has been a very illuminating way to impart the information. You've embodied social artistry, both of you. So thank you. You know, a couple of questions that have come up in the chat. One is around the questions that you were asking, Anneloes, about the relationship between pain and suffering and initiation. You know, Jean, I'd love to hear you speak more about this relationship. One of the reasons being is that, you know, it's been noted that right now, as we all traverse the pandemic, people worldwide are suffering from pandemic fatigue. They're tired of suffering.
Really?
They're
Yes.
tired of hurting. They're tired of lockdown. They're tired of social distancing. And so this issue of the relationship between what we suffer and what we need to learn is, I think, a very important one to people. It's a very complex domain, as you know, more than most, but I think, and Anneloes, whatever you would like to add to it as well, but just speak to us for a few minutes, both of you, about this relationship between suffering and initiation.
You'll notice in so many indigenous societies, there is always a suffering that the young initiate goes through in one way or another, or a great journey, or being made to do impossible things, or being hooked up at the shoulder blades to drag a tree around, and it goes on and on and on. The classical hero and heroine's journey is also about traveling through the domains of existence, difficult, impossible existences, in order to cross the threshold between here and the greater there, and get to the place where, because of your experience, you have become wise. You have become, your mind and soul and body have been amplified in ways that you never thought possible. I mean, all of the classical journeys involve that. Then when you arrive, there is an initiatory place that affirms the initiation of the process, doesn't it? Now, initiation itself involves ritual. Ritual is such a marvelous word. It comes from the Sanskrit rita, which means art, discipline, the dance, that which illumines our transition. Now, what we have now is the great journey, the pandemic, the plagues, the being locked up, the losing of the things that really made life meaningful for many. And yet, without the understanding of this as a journey of transition, this is what we try to do in our book, The Quest of Rose. We take people through, in the story, they become members of the story. We take them through these transition events in such a way that the whole book becomes an initiation, a movement to what is perhaps the next with a new form of knowledge, with a mind and body that gets prepared in the course of the reading, we hope, at least for serious readers and serious doers, because it is a doing and not just a reading, so that they feel levels of themselves that had been closeted or cut off or thought not to exist begin to become awake and alive. This is grow-up time. This is the time of transition. This is the time of the illumining of our transition and the seeing and the feeling of something that is possible, that is capable, that is strong, that is illumined. We are not, as I say, encapsulated bags of skin dragging around a deer, an ego. We are, we are the latest. We are, the illumination itself. We contain that. As cosmic agents, we need to gain access to these deeper knowings, feelings, powers, and thus capable of taking the activity. Our whole book is essentially an initiation.
Anneloes, what would you add to that?
Yeah, so beautifully said, Jean. Well, having gone through many initiations in my own life, what I feel is what's really at the heart of an initiation is the piercing of a veil. It's the falling away of a layer of what we perceive as reality, whereby life is inviting us to see what's hidden, what's behind it. So the call of the initiation is actually, for me at least, it's not suffering. The call is to return home. The call is unity. The call is realization. Actually, the call is healing, the returning to a deeper wholeness. But yet, it seems that sometimes to pierce through these layers, the piercing of the veil, the shattering of the illusions, when there has been so much duality and separation thinking, that can be experienced, of course, as suffering. I personally believe that we are ready for a different activation point. And going back again to my own initiations in my life, it wasn't pain or suffering that helped me to come into unity. It was beauty. When I listen to Bach, when I'm in a beautiful circle of friends, when we're with family, when I'm in nature, when I have the space to relax into myself, the unity is there and the unity is given. When I look at my children as well, and many of the other younger generations, they are ready for a very different activation point. In fact, it's not suffering and all this pain that activates them. In many ways, what I've seen is it numbs them. It scares them. It contracts them. So this is why we are inviting us all to explore a new activation point for our initiation. There is already enough suffering. There's already enough pain. We don't have to add more to that. There's already so much hardship. So let's really connect with that point of beauty, of harmony, and start to trust the love that is freely given, and see with that impulse how we can actually help to create also more loving and caring worlds.
I'm reading other people's reflections, and one is saying that it's an initiation into polarity and understanding and dealing with polarity.
Well, in the Taurus, the polarity has an integration point.
Yes.
So there is the unity point. So when the two poles remain integrated in the unity point, they don't divide. It's only in our dualistic thinking where we create polarizations in such a way that now the diversity cannot come to converge and go back to that unity point. Yeah, the third way.
Another question.
How do you think about this, Jim? You have had so much experience exploring initiatory ordeals, as well as some kind of, I don't want to say resolution, but an activation of the knowing that this is the enunciation of the prophetic moment of the big time change. And with your brilliant introduction, where you really spelled out where we are in this time of utter breakdown and dislocation, for what was true isn't true anymore, for what was capable is not capable. Is it a matter of what we're suggesting, that it is a question, that it is a time of intensive growth in which the universe itself says, oh, we've got some live ones down there. So let's have them. I mean, the very fact that you call your school ubiquity, everywhere, everyone, every how, it's already a statement of what in Italian is both Jim and I are both Sicilians. Generoso cognio, the generous consciousness that allows for us to step into the story in ways that we never before thought possible, indeed insists on it. And stepping into the possibility of a new story may be the biggest initiation of them all.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's a strange paradox around suffering. And, as you were both talking, the words of Aeschylus were coming to my mind, his great line that drop by drop, pain that cannot forget falls upon the heart until in our despair, against our will, comes wisdom by the awful grace of God. And I think the interrelationship between the suffering we endure out of our own darkness, greed, and delusions is paradoxically linked to the very redemption we can't see. And one thinks of the story of Job. There are many other stories of where the suffering is both self-inflicted but also inflicted from external sources, and there has to be some profound shift of state internally, which is what I think the two of you are pointing to, for us to experience the suffering as redemptive. And I think part of the agony in the world right now with the pandemic is that there's no interpretive framework.
Very good, very good. Yes.
For the experience. And I think that's part of the despair around vaccinations. The vaccinations are not the cure here. No. They're an antidote to a very specific aspect of the pandemic. But the pandemic is a much deeper rite of passage.
Yes.
Our failure to understand that constitutes the major part of our predicament. And I think that's why you're writing, your trilogy. That's why Humanity Rising is emerging as powerfully as it is that, as you've said so many times, Jean, it's the story, stupid. It's the story that we tell ourselves that either empower us or impel us toward catastrophe.
So it is the need for a new kind of narrative then.
Totally.
Another kind of story. I think of one of the great original stories of suffering, which of course is the Odyssey of Homer. And the words in Greek are so wonderful, the opening words. Andra moienepe musa polytropos. Sing in me, muse, of the story of the man of many ways. And then it goes on in that opening paragraph, it tells the whole story, many ways. Are we being Is it the enunciation of the prophetic, heroic, and even, oh golly, the turning of the page of history, that moment in which we have been introduced to many ways that we did not expect to have. As Odysseus goes through so many, he faces the entire reality of the Greek world and underworld of that time, and somehow manages to get through it and get home to Penelope. Well, have we been overwhelmed with the wrong stories? The Marvel comics, the Spider-Man who goes from place to place, the people who do impossible things. Is that a lure of becoming, or has it stopped us? Has it stopped our imaginations? How do we activate the imaginative force that can see beyond the fact of the pixels on the screen that have taken away, because we're so pixelated, have taken away our own imaginative power? I think this is what happened to the world and the Greek world from around 700 BC with the Odyssey coming and people being reactivated from the old stories. What is the new story? What is the new mythos? That's why we started with the mythic structure. It is not just suffering. It's also, well, take the heroine's journey. The heroine's journey is very different from the hero's journey. Joe Campbell and I, who were good friends, used to shout at each other about this all the time. Because I said, there's a heroine's journey. He says, no, there's not. Yes, there is. Well, then you write it, he said. Because in the heroine's journey, a classical journey would be the Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz, what does she do? Yes, she gets blown away into another reality. But then she helps the ones on the way who are stuck. The Tin Man, who thinks he has no heart, but is deeply emotional. The Scarecrow, who thinks he has no brain, but is brilliant. The Cowardly Lion, who then does extraordinary things. The heroine's journey is where she also stops, helps, and makes each character go deeper. I'm saying something that is radically political here about where we can go and be. And the way that Anneloes and I really tell these stories as the heroine's journey is our attempt to bring back the deeper, the forbidden, the hidden part of the narrative of the rising female in a time as pure, as deep, deep, deep partners of not just men, but of gods, of heavens, of the universe herself, as we beget to become re-natured in our necessity to become that and who we have to be if we're going to survive our time and heal the earth.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I think what you're just saying about the heroine story needs to be the new hero story. You know, if there's one thing that we need to embrace is a post-patriarchal affirmation of the feminine, not only politically and socially with the liberation of women, but in terms of our own individuation. It's the feminine that always leads that process, at least according to Carl Jung and many mystics,
Yes.
because the feminine, as you just pointed out with Alice in Wonderland, it's the feminine that stops and ends.
I was actually talking about the Wizard of Oz. Alice in Wonderland is very interesting.
I'm sorry, the
No, but that's a good story. No,
but also the Alice in Wonderland, where the heroine is the one who stops and both smells the roses but tends to the weak. And that's a very powerful motif. You know, another one, Jean, Anneloes, that we're embracing in terms of new story is around replacing the notion of sustainability with the notion and the word and the meme regeneration. Because
we go one step further to thriveability. Yeah.
To be sustainable with a broken ecology. Humanity now has to get in there, roll up our sleeves, and regenerate the ecology, regenerate human communities. So the storyline has to be very specifically relevant to the historical timeline. Because if the storyline and the timeline are out of sync, humanity cannot keep up with where they need to be in order to make a difference in a particular inflection point in which we're right in the middle. Anneloes, what would be your comment?
Yes, well, that's to the heart of the 5 years of PhD research and systems change, looking at what's the right words and narrative and why sustainability doesn't work to engage. Because when people are hearing the word sustainability, they visualize a flat line.
Yes, exactly.
And that,
exactly.
yeah, and that doesn't work. And
exactly.
how indeed, yeah, regeneration is really important. But we've been working with this really as a 4-step process. We're currently in unsustainability. So we are on a trajectory of collapse. Then there's sustainability, but then we're moving to regeneration, but ultimately towards thrivability. And how is thrivability a next step after regeneration? It is because it doesn't just regenerate, it also generates. And this is where our future creative potentials and powers are coming in. Because when we're not just regenerative, but we become generative, we access whole new possibilities as well. So it includes both healing as well as being future creative and possibility increasing. So that's another element to the narrative that I think is important maybe to mention. And the ability to thrive is innate within all of us and within all living systems, but it does need the right conditions. And it requires, of course, regeneration because there is so much healing that's necessary. But in a time of collapse, what we're seeing, as Jean was sharing earlier, is an influx of imaginal potency, imaginal consciousness, and imaginal possibility. So which means that there's places in the systems that are not predetermined, not predefined, that become possibilities for possibilities. And when we can capture that, so that's given right now. That's a natural immune system response in times of breakdown, crisis, and disease. That's not just happening in us, it's happening all over in nature herself. When we can capture that, this is when we really start to tap into the profound transformative opportunities that are here now. And this place of, we can't even imagine what is beyond the birth canal.
Surely. You know, I just saw someone, Joan Halgren, I believe her name is, who said that beyond thriving, there is also, and I would love to be in a conversation with her and find out what she wants to say about that. What is beyond thriving? Is Joan Halgren out there?
Yeah,
And we
the
see
co-creative evolution. Cindy Bledsoe also talked about sustainability to regeneration to thrivability to co-creative evolution. Rick, I don't know whether we can bring Jean or Cindy on, but those are interesting notions.
What are the names again, Jim?
Joan Halgren was one of the people. And then
Joan Halgren?
Halgren.
I've got it. Okay.
Joan Halgren, and
there she is.
So Joan can talk.
Joan, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Very well.
Say a little bit more about your chat comment.
Wish I could see you. I can see you, but you can't see me. I served for 4 years in a small town in Minnesota, in Red Wing, Minnesota, on the Grand Mississippi River, on what they called the Sustainability Commission. And at some points, I kind
Nope, we're off.
She'll be right there, Jean. I'm just promoting her. She should be showing up.
There we go. Joan, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay.
I can't promote her. Okay, let's keep going.
The city has been doing wonderful things. The high school is totally supported by solar gardens, as well as all of the governmental cities here, the governmental buildings, I'm sorry. But we had kind of went from sustainability to talking about resilience resilience because of the potential damages that will be done from climate change, and not just being able to thrive, but survive. The potential, whether when you're on the coast, I mean, rebuilding everything. So thrivability is, I embrace your concept of that, but I think resilience, how can we, continue on beyond just thriving? Maybe thriving won't even make it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Jean, Anneloes, what are your comments on that?
Well, first, it's implied. So in thrivability, in kind of the theories around thrivability, resilience, adaptability, future creativity, regeneration are all part of that. Because the ability, you cannot have the ability to thrive. So it's not just thrive, it's thrivability, the ability to thrive from the bigger perspective of life as a whole, not just humanity, but nature herself, life, all of us here together. And that requires resilience and many forms of resiliencies. And within resiliencies is a deeper capacity also to learn. So this is where our evolutionary learning capacity, how do we have accelerated learning capacities in times of crisis and breakdown, which then becomes part of our resilience, so that when there is impacts of shocks, not only can we survive, like we can come after the shock, but we can actually transform and create new possibilities through the shock and create new kind of emergence responses towards these new futures. Jean.
I'm looking at, there is such magnificent, I quite agree with everything you're saying there, Anneloes, and I'm also looking at these magnificent comments that people are making. One said that in higher frequency, unfortunately, that went away. In higher frequencies, you have more material, more understanding, exactly more genius. I'm trying to find it.
In higher frequencies, there's more abundance.
More abundance is what they said. Yeah.
Completely new reality.
Yeah, and he talks about Imagine, John Lennon's Imagine. Now, it's interesting that most of you don't know that John Lennon once wrote a song for me called Mind Games, because he read our book, Mind Games, and he had, Yoko Ono then bought an incredible number of copies. And to finish the funny story, I was away on a mission for the United Nations, and so my husband was home, and John Lennon kept calling and calling and calling. And my husband was very diffident about this kind of thing and just never invited him. When I got home, my husband asks me, well, who is he? And I said, well, they're known as the Beatles. And he said, why would I ever want to meet anyone who names himself after a bug? Years later, I met John, and we had a good laugh over it. But the thing is that that whole sense of imagine. How do we create a kind of world ritual of imagination of what the world can be, is trying to be, and is even coded to be? So it isn't just going off on, well, let's try this, let's try that, good as that is. It's let's find this that's already there beneath the surface crust of consciousness, both self and earth. Let's go deep into what is really wanting to emerge. Someone made the point that in both the myths, both the Alice in Wonderland as well as the Wizard of Oz, they go through a hole. They go through the hole in the earth, and it is going through the hole in the earth, which is the hole in ourselves, that we find the resplendent planes of profoundly new ways of being, acting, becoming, and creating. It is a matter of imagine, of states of consciousness that take us to the imaginal, where it may be that we have not just profound understanding and visions of what it can be, but also the impetus that takes us to these next stages. It may be another state of consciousness, that someone actually said, that has the it takes us to the regeneration, because we also have the vision of the creation as it can potentially look and feel like.
Let me bring in a question about the nature of metamorphosis. There's a question about how color and sound can be used in the process of metamorphosis.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Because as we think of metamorphosis, it can often be abstract, but but we can also practice metamorphosis, through meditation, through various instrumentalities. We had a session just yesterday on polarity practice and the use of breath. So as you explore your trilogy and the spiritual development of Rose, what practices does she engage in? Does she use sound? Does she use color? Does she use geometric shapes? How does that play into the process of metamorphosis?
That's a beautiful question. If you look in the paperback version, especially, you'll see all kinds of symbols coded into it. But also in the ebook version, where we have the cosmic compass design and other forms of the design, you'll see a lot of the sacred geometry. So Rose sees everything geometrically in terms of deeper relationships of cosmic orders, but she sees those cosmic orders not as static, but as information potential that she can connect. And so she hears these sounds when she has her near-death experience and goes deep back into the womb. Incredible sounds of the cosmic coherence that then cohere her consciousness to be able to come into a much deeper experiential understanding of that unity and that wholeness. And she also sees different lights, colored lights, especially profound little blue light that she sees as almost an other spiritual form of a sun. And that links me to Anna Baring, who is here, I see, with us as well, and just put a very important comment about we need a new myth like the real myth to inspire the young. And that's exactly what in the story Rose has been looking for. She's exploring also how the cosmic information is like the holy grail. She calls it the holy grail of communication, because it shows us how to renew. It shows us the essence of immortality, which is what the Grail stories are also always after. But now she finds it in a way that we can architect with it, that we can apply that for the redesign of our governance, our education, our economic and our financial system. In fact, the cosmic compass that she discovers as a result of that is the foundation for the seeds constitution that I'm one of the architects of. So we actually implemented that in real life to serve as a constitution now, for the creation of new financial, economic, educational, and decentralized governance for regeneration and liability. So it definitely features in that. And sound and color, especially sound for me, is one of the most direct ways to come into these deeper states of consciousness that Jean also talked about. When the consciousness shift, we are able then to access capacities, perspectives that are fundamental for this next stage of where we need to be prepared for.
Any comment, Jean?
Well, I think it is this next stage that is very, very, very important in all of these. Now, things are coming up on the chat about maybe these kinds of thoughts are for older folk. What about the younger folk who may be thinking very differently?
The way that was a profound question. It's about old souls and new souls.
And new souls. But Anneloes has very young children. I think 10 and 12. And so I would ask Anneloes, how are your children who've been watching and being, taken up with the writing of this book, how do they respond to these new ideas at 10 and 12 years old?
They respond to it as coders. That's what's interesting. There's one part of the book where the cosmic compass becomes a game, which is based on my son Manu, the youngest. And the questions that Rose is asking there, her nephew Olive, like, how would you design a game for morality or compass for, navigating the moral choices of of what's going on right now? And then Manu, which really in the voice of Olaf, comes up with these wonderful creative ways in which how to create a game where everyone learns to be fair to each other, but still you have to have some restrictions at times when somebody tries to take over. But that's just his young mind. But what I found is, and this is where we see the new narrative, the new future archetypes, they respond to this crisis in a very fundamental systemic level of, well, maybe that game is not going to work. So why don't we create a different game? Let's change the code. Let's change the rules of the game rather than limiting out to break point. Let's do it differently. Why are we making it so difficult? They often say, just do it different. Yeah.
There's questions coming up about education. And educating the children differently. I am reminded of one of the greatest minds of the late Renaissance, who was William Shakespeare. But William Shakespeare had an extraordinary education. In his education, there was something that was in which you played great people in history. You played Caesar, you played Cassius, you got to speak with. And of course, it was the time of the high point of the English language, too. So that you played you incarnated great minds, great words. That was one thing. Another thing was that you imitated. You would get a speech or a statement, and you would take that language, but you would turn it into your own language. You looked at fairy tales. I mean, that was part of it, that you really became the others. You became what you beheld or what you learned, rather than regarding it as something that was just objective. Some of you know that when I was a child, I met Einstein. I was 8 years old. I went to a school that took us to meet the great elders of the time. And he came in and he seemed a little vague. He had on a red sock and a blue sock. Very sweet. He said, "Yeah, what are your questions? What are your questions? How can we get to be as smart as you?" And he said, "Read fairy tales." We did not like that answer at all. So another smart aleck kid said, "Mr. Einstein, how can we get to be smarter than you?" He said, "Read more fairy tales." Okay. So after our little interview, I got to catch him in the hall, and I said, "Mr. Einstein, you're talking about imagination, aren't you?" Yeah, imagination. That's who I am. My main quality. People think I'm a mathematician. Terrible. The students do the math. But I have a great imagination. And I get on the light beam and I go through space. That's where it is. You bring imagination, it will take you to the important places. And that to me was the greatest teaching of my whole life. And what we really ultimately try to do in this book, imagination carries you to the imaginal, the mind of God, the consciousness of the cosmos, which we contain within us. But we have to open through the imaginative forms that then take us to the potencies of not only how it works, but how it can grow and become in your life, as well as the unfolding that is there in our space-time matrix for the unfolding of the larger life, the larger architecture. A lot of our book is about architecture, the becoming architects of this future emergence, which lives within us.
Thank you, Jean. We're coming to the end of our time. Let me just ask both of you, as we close, one last question that's coming from Anne Baring.
Oh boy.
And that is, her chats have been about, the Grail and recovering the numinosity of the Grail in our time. So as each of you look around the world, where do you discern the numinous? Where is the numinous in our world right now? Anneloes, do you want to go first, then Jean?
Yeah, to me, it's in the opening of our hearts. I see that although it appears that there is a lot of hardening for people and tiredness and fatigue that we just talked about, but there is also an increased sensibility, even a sense of sensitivity. There's an opening of the heart. The heart is always luminous. When the heart can speak, when the heart can guide us, we naturally feel that luminosity. So it's for me in these openings that are happening. There are conversations possible now at all levels of society, in fact, that are just incredible. That would have been even unthinkable a year ago. There are things we can say now. Mm-hmm. That is for me the beginning of a deep change, of where that luminosity is starting to emerge and starting to present itself. But now we need to embody it even deeper, to truly now start to recreate, redesign, and transform the systems of our world as well.
Beautiful. The numinosity of the heart.
Luminosity.
Where do you find the numinous in the world today?
Well, I find it in Anne Baring, quite frankly.
Don't we all?
I think everything that she writes, you tap into what she's thinking. Anne, in a way, is for me a kind of grail that holds not so much the blood of Christ on the cross, but it is the deep knowing of someone who has lived long and beautifully and powerfully and tragically. It is the elder who has really done their human homework, and who has moved from the muchness of their life to the suchness of being. And that's what Anne is to me. She is the suchness, the essence, the great drink from the cup. I know she's embarrassed and probably doesn't want me to say these things, but I feel them so profoundly I have to. From muchness to suchness, to heartfulness, to the opening of the channels of becoming. We are all in a stage of radical becoming. Breakdown followed by becoming. And if we can hold to that, then we can truly rinascita, be reborn, live again.
Yeah, beautifully put. I think that's the perfect tonality with which to draw this to a close, everyone. The numinosity of the heart. So much information now. And that's why we start every session on Humanity Rising with heart coherence, that to the degree to which we can attune ourselves to our own heart, that's where the numinous is. That's where the coherence is. And once you reach coherence in your own heart, just attuning yourself to your own heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving, you activate the numinosity of your own interior. And I think, Jean, your identification of Anne as elder, someone like yourself, I would add, who's moved from the muchness of being to the suchness of being. We need not only the numinosity of the heart, we need the numinosity of those who so have worked on themselves that they've sculpted, in the spirit of Plotinus, his great image of the developing of numinosity. He says it's like a sculptor chipping away the stone. It's not how much you do, it's what extraneousness you can take away until finally you have just been reduced to your essence, to your suchness. And to be able to know those kinds of people in your life, to be able to resonate with their energetic qualities, gives one a sense of possibility. So I think this combination of the numinosity of the heart and the numinosity of the elders is a beautiful image, as we all, wherever we are, as we traverse an increasingly turbulent world. We need to contemplate these matters. And I would just add one little note of numinosity. I am feeling very deeply, as I live my life in this moment, the numinosity of community. I think we've come to a point where we have to hold hands, because the passage forward is not going to be an easy one. And we need to go within. We need examples of those great souls who embody the potential that we all know is possible. And we all need to come together as a single community of seekers at this time, in the spirit of radical collaboration, because it's going to take all of us together to traverse what's coming. And this book by Anneloes and Jean is a beautiful story of a rose, as she explores all these dimensions of time and space with a passion for what is possible if she is just simply willing to go deep enough into her own being. So I want to thank both of you for this inspirational session. I wish you both well. I recommend everyone to buy this off of Amazon or your local bookstore. The Future Human Trilogy of human possibility. So thank you, Jean. Thank you, Anneloes. Thank you, everyone. Those of you who can stay on, there's a link that's in the chat box. Stan will put it in that you can join. And then we're going to take a little break now for the next couple of weeks. We'll be back at the end of August for a new program with Humanity Rising. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Anneloes. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
So much. Bye-bye.